Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the latest episode of Games Upcast. My name is Cameron McCulloch-Keeble, and his name is...
Lewis? Crawford? Okay.
There we go. I don't know. You might want to throw something different in there. You might want to be Lewis de la Rocca or something.
Sure.
It's been some weeks, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been a while.
How was Copenhagen?
Very nice. Very Danish, very expensive, very lovely.
It would be worrying if it wasn't very Danish. If you went over and it was suddenly very Portuguese, that would be...
Well, they were having... Yeah, no. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the latest episode of Games Up podcast brought to you by worldgeeklynews.com. And let's get in, as we do every week, and we're starting with an indie game of the week, because our indie game of the week is, as always at the minute, our EGX indie game that is happening, that we are covering as part of our final bits of EGX 2018 coverage. And this week it is Obsolete. Obsolete is an awesome game that puts you in the devs described it as a pastel future aesthetic, which is like neo-noir but with pastel colours, so it's not all dark and Tron-like. Instead, it's very muted and soft on the palette. Totally different kind of aesthetic than you're used to. Very kind of 90s videotape-esque, but without the harsh colours in it. And the main character is a kind of future cyber hacker detective who is also in a wheelchair. And the game is half about this sort of future story that you hack and detect your way through with that kind of storyline, and then also half about how you, as a detective, would use a wheelchair in the future. So that's Obsolete. It was a game that we found at EGX 2018, and you should go and check it out. More information will come out on Wednesday at 6:30 with our EGX Indie Extravaganza, which is a series of interviews that we took at EGX of some of the best devs that we found on the indie show floor. And now that we've done our EGX, now that we've done our indie game of the week, we will move on to the news. Lewis, what has been happening in the world of video games this week?
In all frankness, it's been fairly quiet, I think. I think everyone's things are starting to get more and more spaced out now, because we're getting kind of close to that Christmas period of announcements and other stuff. So it's been fairly quiet, I think.
It's been almost as quiet as a desert tumbleweed quietly bouncing across the western plains, as though there might be something in the near future that perhaps publishers and video game people are looking to avoid. Actually, there's been some stuff happening, mainly the kind of stuff that's not around releases or major announcements, because, of course, come Friday, we have Red Dead Redemption 2, which will likely be the year's video game behemoth, and you also likely see news kind of duck away from it to avoid being caught up in the crossfire of that game coming out. That being said, there were some things that happened this week, and we start with XO18, Xbox's fan fest that they are putting on this year in Mexico City. And the announcement for Xbox Fan Fest is that Crackdown 3 will finally be put in the hands of the public and playable when it comes to the Xbox XO18 conference, convention, whatever you want to call it, in Mexico City. Good! It's about bloody time. Game's still out in February, apparently. I'm not sure that I believe that.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see what it looks like. This is a game that has changed like everything about it multiple times now. We first saw it quite a while ago, and it looked very rough.
We first saw it at the start of the generation.
Yeah, and it continued to look very rough for quite a while. And I think the most recent time that we saw it actually started to look kind of a lot better. So I'm very interested to see what it looks like now.
We'd heard rumours and reports for a while that the game was being delayed so heavily because it needed that time to kind of reach that polish and reach a level where it would come out and not underperform and not underwhelm. And frankly, that's always going to be a problem for them, because the longer they push back, the longer that they go further and further from the release date that we expected of a couple of years ago, the more kind of expectation they have to live up to of what is this game, why has it been delayed so heavily, how much work has got into it. Crackdown feels to me a bit like a holdover of what Microsoft was. You know, there's a big kind of Terry Crews star at the front of it, and Terry Crews is awesome, don't get me wrong, but he's not what sort of pushes critically big video games, and there's a big Terry Crews star at the front of it. It focuses heavily on multiplayer, it's got a big focus on cloud work and this, that, the other. And it seems like Microsoft has shifted in the course of the development of this game, but Crackdown 3 hasn't. And yeah, I'm with you. I think it's going to be not just fascinating, but also a really big indicator, perhaps, of where Microsoft might be going in the future if more focus has been put on one side than the other, or if they're just trying to get this out the gate and damage control it to some extent. I don't know that they can ever recoup the profits that this game must have cost them. I mean, this is, 5-6 years of dev at this point? That's a long time.
Yeah, and well, I mean, it's tough because I mean, the last time I looked at it, it didn't look like a game that had 5 or 6 years of dev. So it's very interesting to see what it's going to look like.
I mean, it's also gone through multiple studios. You know, it's a game that is kind of notorious at this point for being not just anticipated, but also one of those dev hell games that really it will be a surprise that the game is coming out. And I hope that it does really well, because there's a lot of devs who have put their time into it, and I do have a lot of respect for Microsoft for keeping it on the burner and not just scale bounding it, right? So there's something in there. Clearly they see something in it, and I do hope it performs up to that when it comes out. Plus, Crackdown's a great series. Like, there's some real good promise in that game if it works.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and it's got a good chance of doing well now, because I don't know if this was in our news originally, but Days Gone, the PS4 exclusive, has been delayed away from April, I think it was, which is where Crackdown, or February, where Crackdown's being released. Sorry. So maybe that'll help it along. It's now not got as much competition.
Yeah. So Sony Bend is developing Days Gone, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, they made the announcement this week that they've made the decision to push the game back from February to April to give it a bit more time to be polished and finished up. I feel like they might have done this in response to the crunch discussion that's been happening over the last couple of weeks with Microsoft, with Rockstar and Red Dead and Telltale. There's been a really, really big discussion about crunch that we'll get into a bit later on in one of the later news stories. In fact, the one after this. But yeah, they decided to push it back 2 months to April. And I think this is a good thing. Days Gone has had a similar thing, I would say, to Crackdown. It looks a lot more polished, to be sure. But it doesn't quite have that hook. Or it doesn't have something that suggests it's of the quality of what we usually expect from first-party Sony studios. And I think giving it a little bit more time, maybe it won't ever have that hook. Maybe it won't be the next Last of Us or God of War or whatever. And those are lofty expectations. But a bit more time to polish, to get quality of life, to crush bugs, to this, that, the other. It's always a good thing. And, at this point, we're not struggling for games to play. So I'm glad that Bend are being given the space to do this properly.
Yeah, for sure.
And yeah, as we say, this is in response to another news story that's been happening this week, which is the discussion of crunch within the industry. So to give you a bit of background, crunch is known as the time where a video game is close to being finished, but is also close to its releasing or going gold deadline. To go gold means that all the content is locked down in the game, nothing changes beyond that point, it's just patched to be easier or have better quality of life in it. As a game is set to go gold, the developers are usually asked to crunch on it, which is where they put in egregious hours to make the game work and to make the game be content complete and reach the standard that it needs to be considered to go gold, and then publish likely in a few weeks or months' time after the fact. Crunch has just finished on Red Dead 2. It finished very recently, in fact. And crunch usually sort of goes over go gold a little bit and into bug crunching and into sort of squashing down on quality of life and patches. And to some extent that's so that patches on day one are small, so that as much goes on the disk as possible, but it's also to make sure that where a game is patched on day one, there's as much bug crunching in it as possible, so the game sort of works as well as possible. The discussion about crunch came up recently with Telltale, who were infamous for crunch, who were infamous for the conditions they put their devs through, especially with the Telltale engine being as broken as it was. They had a pretty infamous reputation for making their developers work really pretty hard, and that became very, very clear when Telltale went under recently. But Rockstar also had a really bad reputation for crunch. During Red Dead Redemption 1, there was the Wives of Red Dead hashtag and how it was doing serious damage to the families of the devs working on it. GTA 5 and 4 were known to be 100-hour week work cycles, which is just fucking insane.
Yeah.
That's wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, and you have to wonder, could they not have... when did they announce the release date, actually? Do you know that?
The release date was announced earlier this year when they put out the second trailer. I want to say it was around March or April time.
Because it makes me wonder whether it wasn't possible to, be more conservative with the release when they started off. Because 100-hour week, if that's, necessary for your game to be in like a polished state at the end, then something's gone wrong, I feel.
Now, we should clarify that 100-hour weeks were what was expected what was done in Red Dead, GTA 4, and GTA 5. This week, Rockstar embargoed their employees from talking about what it was like working on the game. And the likely reason they've done this is two reasons, in fact. The first is likely because Rockstar have had people leak the details of working at Rockstar to the press before, and to ensure that doesn't happen anymore, they have put their employees under NDAs, or embargoes, or bans for posting on social media about it. The other reason is likely because that way it's a lot harder to identify who is working at Rockstar, and for people to schmooze with them, for people to push leaks out of them, because that happens quite a lot. So, this week they lifted that ban and said, employees, you are more than welcome to talk on social media about what your conditions are like here at Rockstar. We've said some dumb stuff this week, and we want you to be honest about it. And it turns out it's actually a lot better than it used to be. A lot better than it used to be. There have been devs all across the sort of scope of Red Dead, from people from gameplay designers to sound designers. The most I've heard so far is a 60-hour work week, and that was from one person for 1 week. The exact quote that came from Dan Houser earlier this week was that they were working 100-hour weeks to get the game, but he later clarified this with 3 members of the senior leadership team, himself and 2 other writers of the game, and nobody else was expected to do that. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't do that. That doesn't mean that there is a culture of quietly expecting them to do it because senior is, but across the board it seems that Rockstar have actually improved their crunch a lot more and done a lot more to make sure their employees are kept well and safe. And good. With the amount of money that Rockstar brings in from these things, they can afford to. Red Dead has been in development for well over 6 years at this point. And I'm glad that those 6 years have been spent not killing people to make sure this game comes out. It sounds ridiculous to even suggest that that can be a thing, but there is a history of it, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it's something that's kind of rampant but not talked about enough in the games industry, and actually in tech industry in general. But I think especially in the games industry due to the way that they set deadlines years before they actually release the games. Yeah, I'm glad that maybe actually I didn't read enough into it, and actually if it's not as bad as the 100-hour block week that people have kind of been saying, or there's been lots of talk about it being everyone forced to work it, but I'm glad to hear maybe that's not the case, and it's only a few people that work that way, as far as they say, I guess.
Yeah, that's the thing, is you have to take all of this with a pinch of salt, because there's always the situation that other people who are working 100-hour weeks feeling that they can't say anything. Is there the problem of a sort of quiet bullying going on? And I don't believe or know if any of this is. I'm not even suggesting that is the case. It's been the case in other devs in the past. And yeah, you are totally right. crunch is a dangerous thing, man. And it's not talked about enough because it's unfortunately one of the things that the industry does very badly, and hasn't improved on until now. There has been quite a few things that the industry has been getting better at, and the conversation around it has resulted in that getting better, like representation, like voice acting rights with the voice actor strike that happened a few years ago, like transparency and numbers. Like players and accounts and what that kind of means for your ownership rights. They're slowly improving these things as they come up. But crunch has never really improved until recently. I really do believe that the closing of Telltale will be a major turning point in that discussion. There's been pushes for devs to unionize for a long, long time. And I don't know about your opinion on this, but I am so for it. Please unionize. Just because what a union would do would protect that these people are treated a certain way, their benefits and their expectancies are allocated in such a way. For example, had they been under a union, the people who were let go of from Telltale would have maintained their health benefits for longer than they did, meaning they would be in a far safer situation. And it's that kind of thing that goes unspoken about from the industry side of things. It's that kind of when a video game closes, a lot of people think, "Oh no, we won't get the end of Clementine's story," or "Oh no, we won't get Dead Space 4." Is that studio still open?
What's that?
Is that studio still open?
For Dead Space?
That was Neversoft, wasn't it?
No, I don't think so. Oh, who made
Anyway,
Visceral?
Who? Yeah, Visceral. That's it. So I think they are. But whoever the last studio that EA shut down, like it's people think, oh, we won't get this IP or that IP, but we don't really talk about the fact that. But how were those devs laid off? How were they contracted in the first place? Were they contract workers with their own responsibilities, or were they on salary? Were they paid hourly, so they're given overtime, or were they given time off in lieu for the work they did? We don't really talk about that, and it's a problem in the media industry in general. It comes from a place of you should love this job, so you should want to do it as hard as you possibly can, and that is a stigma we have to break out of every industry. These have to become more sustainable going forward, and not just because we want them and we like them and we want them to be good, but also because there are more and more people breaking into them and making progress through them. Those games, those movies, those albums, those TV shows, documentaries, so on and so forth, are more and more responsible for pushing and shaping agendas. And if we're teaching people that this can be a career for them, we also have to make sure it's a career that doesn't kill them.
For sure.
So, that was a heavy discussion. That was a heavy topic. But we were a bit behind the boat on that. The discussion of crunch happened sort of in the past week, and it will happen a bit more going forwards. But there's something else that's going to be happening in the next few weeks, and it's utterly fascinating, potentially. It's time to go back to the fight between Konami and our favourite man who might be making a game if it ever comes out, Hideo Kojima. Lewis, this week and over the last few weeks, a number of people involved in the Metal Gear series and the Metal Gear franchise, including David Hayter himself, have started tweeting teases for something exciting and something to be revealed very soon. The likelihood is that the reveal is going to take place at the Game Awards, as there's been some connection with those people, with the Game Awards company in the past, and because when the Game Awards have been tweeting, these people who have been tweeting teases have been responding quite frequently, Hater and so on and so forth. The two big things to come out of these teases is that we should be expecting something exciting, something new, and definitely something Metal Gear themed. Lewis, are we getting Metal Gear 6?
Ooh, are we getting Metal Gear 6? I don't think so. I think we're getting a remake of Metal Gear 1. That's what my money's on. I don't think that they would. I think that like they're in a position where they want to be very safe, and I think it doesn't get much safer than Metal Gear 1 remake. And I also just don't know if Metal Gear Survive is anything to go by. I'm not sure they're able to make a Metal Gear 6. You know?
I've been thinking about this since we heard of these tweets and we heard of these rumors, and I'm like, yeah, a Metal Gear remake makes a lot of sense because it is the anniversary of it coming up, so it does fit within that timeline. If they were ever going to do it, it makes sense. It's David Hayter, so he would be involved with it. He would be part of the project because they turned away from David Hayter in Metal Gear Solid 5, but they would have to go back to him in Metal Gear Solid 1, so yeah, that makes some sense. But there is something sticking in the back of my mind that says, but Konami are not going to put that out. They are not going to put out something with Kojima's name on it, and they'd have to. There's no getting around it. Kojima would have to be named on the project, if only because he wrote it, he directed it, he pushed that series through. He cast a bunch of the game as well. Like, he would have to be included in some form, and I just don't see it happening. Konami recruited a couple of years ago for the next game in the Metal Gear series, and for a while people were thinking that it was Metal Gear 5 Survive. They assumed that was the next step forward. But the more I look at Metal Gear Survive, the more I think I would be interested whether that started as a DLC. Like, I would be really interested to see if Metal Gear Survive was not built from the ground up to be this new game. And obviously it has the old map and the old mechanics and the Fulton system and this, that, the other. So it obviously wasn't built from the ground up. But I wonder whether Konami pushed that out to just make it clear they're still there. But they've been recruiting a lot of people. Like, when you look at what's included in Metal Gear Survive, they've recruited a lot of people to make that game if they did. I kind of feel like we might be getting something new.
But something, right, yeah. Okay, I'm thinking about this.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, I was thinking, obviously, like, they changed the voice actors, and so it wouldn't be David Hayter, but then it could always just be, like, later in the timeline. And then that could work.
If I had to put my finger on a couple of sort of theories or ideas, I could see it being a few things. I could see it being either Metal Gear 6, sod it, pick one of the endings that should have been in Metal Gear 5, put that right up the front as a kind of intro-outro situation and then play on. I'd imagine it would be that everything was nuked, and now we live in this world where everything is nuked.
Okay, it's a little bit alternative timeline, but okay.
Yeah, I suppose it is, actually.
I mean, like, like every other game in the series is after the one, apart from 3. It's after 5. So if everything got nuked, it'd be a little bit different.
Yeah, okay. I suppose maybe... But that's the thing is, okay. No, I see where you're going. So, okay, let's go straight down the timeline then. Something either that connects 5 and the ones that follow it.
Yeah.
Whether it's called 6 or not, maybe it's Metal Gear Solid insert title here rather than Metal Gear Solid number.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see it being the case, actually. See, now I'm quite interested. Yeah.
I could also see it, as you say, being later down the timeline, and it is the next, chronologically, Metal Gear game. It is the following on of that, because that at least would mean that they don't have to include anything written by Kojima. They can just take what works and move on. That would mean that they really get to put their own stamp on it without it being zombies. Like, they can take those characters, they can take those systems, they can take what's kind of what pre-exists and go, okay, here's what Konami's version of it is. But it also means that because they're writing new stuff, they're not held to the expectations of previous work. Like, they don't have to fit in with that timeline. They don't have to work with canon, so on and so forth. They get to define a new cornerstone for Metal Gear going forward, which is very much what they said they were doing when they were recruiting for this new game. They very much said it was the next era of Metal Gear will be what these people are working on.
Yeah. Oh, you've got me very excited, actually. So I'm still, though, with a pinch of salt, because I think it's still, for me, the fifth game wasn't what I wanted it to be.
Oh, really?
No.
How so?
It's a very good game, but it's very not Metal Gear at the same time. Like, it's got part of it in there, and then a lot that's not. Yeah, that pretty much summarizes it. Like, the game's great, it really is, and like it's got some of the best gameplay of the generation, really. Like, seriously. But at the same time, it's not really like the other games.
Okay.
So I guess. But it wasn't perfect, is my point. It's like story-wise and kind of having an interesting story didn't really do much.
Yeah, I think for me the story is the big hang-up, especially is now where we know what it could have and should have been. Man, if there's been the discussion about or there was the discussion of if the online bit of it ever reaches the full nukes or no nukes situation, will something happen? At this point, we'll never know because there's so many people playing the game. Like, yeah. you would have to be dedicated in quite a number of years down the line to make that be a thing. But I'd be fascinated what the plan is, if there is a plan. And like, how long, if there is a plan, how long do they keep it for? This, that, the other. That would be really interesting. The other thing I can see it being is Metal Gear Survive 2.
Oh, please no.
I know it sounds dumb, but like, they were saying it will be the new era, like whatever these people are working on is the new era of Metal Gear, and Survive looks very different to all the other games, so I suppose I couldn't fault them that they would have done something very different with the series, and I don't think it's the worst idea. It's not a great one, but I could see how with that world and its lore and its technology and maybe developing that story parallel to the other Metal Gear games, you could do something interesting. I doubt they would, but I could see there being the possibility of it.
Yeah. I'm just excited to see what's there, even if it's bad, I guess.
Total never gonna happen. Crazy thought though. Could be Metal Gear Rising 2.
Ooh. Yeah, it could be. I'd actually be quite interested in that. Because I really enjoyed the first one. Even though, again, it's not really Metal Gear Solid, but
yeah,
the gameplay of it's very fun. And I'll be well up for seeing what that looks like, in 2019 or 2020, whatever.
I really hope that one day they go back and redo that game and kind of like on the Switch. That game would be really interesting because the motion controls are so much more one-to-one and tactile. You could do a lot with it, but also because then the title of that game would have to be Metal Gear Rising Revengeance, which I think just sells itself.
For sure.
So yeah, either way, something is being revealed about Metal Gear at the Game Awards this year, likely, which I also find very interesting when you think about how closely aligned Jeff Keighley is to Kojima.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the only bit that had me just questioning when you said that it would be at the Game Awards is, I guess it'd be an interesting place for it to be because it would probably be at least close to whatever Death Stranding's bringing this year. Because it's always bringing some extra trailer to add confusion to whatever meta exists at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, a couple of weeks ago I recently put out a video for World Geekly News. And if you want to understand our connection with World Geekly News, we published a big thing this morning at 9 a.m. Explaining there's been some big old changes in the world of Games Up, and you should go and have a look at that. It's very exciting. But I published a video for them recently about Silent Hills and how like it had the possibility to be one of the most interesting games ever made, and just didn't. But in researching that, I fell down a big old rabbit hole that basically suggests that Death Stranding is Silent Hills, and the whole Kojima Konami thing is a total farce. And at some point there will be the reveal of like Kojima and Konami on stage and it's all one game, and it's not the case. Like that's never the case. That's absolutely not what's going on. But that rabbit hole was some of the most interesting game theory shit I have listened to in years. And like some of the stuff that Kojima and the people who work with him do is not just like, it's not just auteurish interesting, it's full on batshit weird interesting. Like the band who have made the tracks for the trailers for Death Stranding, their album that all this music came from was released 4 years ago, back when Kojima was still at or just about to leave Konami, and the front cover of their album is Norman Reedus covered in oil. Like, it is exactly an image from Death Stranding. And that's like a lot of where this whole thing comes from, is like, oh, well, he's clearly been making it for many years whilst he was still at Konami, and he's likely taken the Fox engine with him and this, that, the other. And again, absolutely no chance of it happening, but he is so batshit weird that he's probably the only person that potentially could do anything like that.
Yeah.
Again, he's not. Would be interesting though. Yeah, the whole Game Awards thing is really interesting. I do think that's probably where it's happening because there has been a lot of follow-up tweets. There was David Hayter and somebody else, and I forget the somebody else's name. Apologies. But they were both they've both been responding to or sending out tweets or Instagramming with old clips of Metal Gear and old clips of characters. And they've also been putting in a really interesting highlight on something new and interesting, which is, you know, equally woo. But they've been replying a lot to the Game Awards social media, and either they're very desperate to present at the Game Awards and hoping that'll make it happen, but it seems a little too coordinated for that. And yeah, you're totally right. Keighley hasn't just been in favor of Kojima, he's been quite verbally, like, loudly anti-Konami for a couple of years with the way that they've kept Kojima away from the Game Awards. And man, if Konami are there to announce a Metal Gear thing, I kind of feel like the caliber of this year's show might be even higher than it's been, and Keighley's been killing it for years.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I'm super excited for that.
Very excited. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is some stuff you should look out for in the future. But this week, the likelihood is that you'll be looking out for one very specific thing, and it comes out on Friday. Lewis, are you going to be playing Red Dead?
You know, a long time ago we had this talk, and I was kind of very down on Red Dead because I'm not overly into like cowboy themes. But you know what? I think I probably will. I've been watching kind of the media around it, and it's kind of really got me excited, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's really caught me how far they're going with this, I guess.
Yeah, I agree.
Like it really seems like they, you know, want to. Oh, I hate to bring Witcher up in conversations all the time, but I do. But it's like it really feels like, and they've kind of said it themselves in some different ways, is that like they're really going after like that kind of level of RPG.
To me, it reminds me of the San Andreas to the rest of the GTA games. Like,
yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah,
San Andreas is this totally and to that extent, I don't know that Red Dead 3, when it eventually comes out, because this game is going to sell millions. I think when Red Dead 3 eventually comes out, it will probably look nothing like this. Because San Andreas is this totally different, crazy systems, crazy RPG mechanics, crazy level of character detail. And then the games that followed and came after it were just like, all right, whatever, here's a plane, go shoot some people. And in the same way, Red Dead 1 is, there's a lot of character development in there. There's some RPG stuff in there, in the hunting, in the gathering, in the kind of ongoing quest lines, and especially as you get into Undead Nightmare. But yeah, this is on a different level. Jess, my partner, was telling me earlier she watched a video from esteemed and brilliant Australian journalist enthusiast, whatever, Alana Pierce, who works at Funhouse now. And she was saying that the biggest thing she's had a problem with in Rockstar games, the biggest nitpick thing she's always had a problem with, is that you can go into a barber and get a haircut that's longer than the one you had before. Now you can't. If you go into a barber and shave your head, you have to wait across the length of the game for your hair to grow again. That's stupidly fascinating.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk down or whatever, but to clarify, what that means is not just a person has had to code a person. They've had to code the person, the bones within that person to make sure they act like a person, the flesh and skin on that person to make them look like a person, and then they've effectively had to code a video game realistic version of the Play-Doh man that you press down on over time to make his hair grow, except this is doing it automatically and you can style it into braids. That's one person in a 70-hour game. I am buzzed.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm guessing it's PS4 for you.
Yes, that is actually a big issue with this whole discussion for me, is that I might be waiting till sometime in 2020 when the PC version comes out.
Do you think there will be a PC version?
Yeah, I think so. I think it'll be a while off though. Because recently they've done it for all of them, but it has always been kind of like a year after, a year and a half after. So I might get it before then and then get it again. We'll see. I don't know. Thing is, that it's like you hold on for the quality graphics, and you can see that this is a game that really looks like it's gonna.
Oh yeah, it looks beautiful.
And then it's like, we're wait a year.
I have a feeling in my head they might be aiming to do something similar to what they did with GTA, where this is the version you play for a year and a half, and the next version that comes out will be the next gen version.
Yeah.
So yeah, there'll be something on Xbox 2 and PS5 that are Red Dead 2 again, and I'd put money on there being Undead Nightmare in that, not in this one.
Yeah. Okay. Well, here's hoping they tell us at some point.
Here's hoping they get round to it a little faster than 2021, right?
Yeah.
That, ladies and gentlemen, was the latest episode of Games Up Podcast. Again, we are now brought to you by World Geekly News, WGN.com, and you can go and look there for all of your World Geekly News. I'm sure we'll probably come up with a better catchphrase for it than that, but thank you to them for supporting us as well. And you can support us by going to all of our wonderful social channels. We are at Games Upcast on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, and iTunes. You can find us on all of those things, like us on all of those things so we get out in front of a few more people, and subscribe to us on all of those things, preferably all of them at once, so that you don't miss an episode of the show. We publish at 6:30 every Monday and 6:30 every Wednesday for our EGX stuff, though this is the last couple of weeks that we'll be doing those, so keep your ear to the ground for those. 6:30 every week, and we will see you next week for, I'm guessing, what will be just a cowboy-filled episode of this show, because I will be deep into Arthur Red Dead, whatever his saying.
Arthur Red Dead.
Arthur Red Dead.
Ooh.
Arthur, not John
I
Marston.
think next week we need to do a spooky episode.
Oh yeah, we should really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Oh, we could review Assassin's Creed Odyssey as well.
Totally not linked.
It's shit. And the game's up.